Hi, and welcome again to Meet RX Success Stories. And I'm Brooke Erdman. And today I'm happy to say I am interviewing two people, um, Judi and Dr. Karl
Camp.
Goldcamp. I put on my glasses so I can read properly. Dr. Goldcamp. And they're going to share their long story from keto to carnivore. And it's a great story. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here with us, you guys. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And I'll just start. Let's start back to what brought you to keto, because that's kind of where you were keto for a while, and then you went into the carnivore diet. Can we do that? So
Surely.
what's going on for you guys when that was happening?
Severe sickness within 1 month. So we had a medical practice, a lot of stress. So say a lot of stress entered our lives. You're running a medical practice in the downturn in the economy, 2008. So now in 2012, we're still getting all of that, financial primarily. So the stress drove for me to have severe Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, the worst they've diagnosed in New London, Connecticut at L&M. And for Judi,
I was misdiagnosed for 4 years. I was losing the eyesight in my right eye. And finally, after 4 years, when I lost my eyesight, the specialist I was seeing said he thought it was all psychosomatic. I was causing it by blocking something, but he sent me to a neuro-ophthalmologist first. And she immediately said, you need an MRI and you need to see a neurosurgeon. At that point, she didn't tell me I had a tumor. She waited till she got the MRI results, but I had a benign tumor, which caused my blindness in my right eye.
Where was that tumor exactly?
It was pressing on the optic nerve of my right eye, and at that point, 4 years, it was starting to travel to my left eye. So if I had not caught it at that time, I would be blind in both eyes.
her tumor was just a little smaller than this.
Oh my God. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. That's what I did.
So, but both things were going on for both of you at the same time. It's really
Yes, he was diagnosed in October 2012, and I was diagnosed in November of 2012.
So Judi's tumor was slow growing. So after we got it all diagnosed and everything, and it's amazing to see the different kinds of imagery they have, you know, it's not just MRIs and so on, but all these different shades. You almost thought you could reach in and just pop it out. I mean, it just, you can't help but be in awe of that technology. So because it was slow growing, the doc said, for Judi, says, you know, there's no rush. We'll schedule surgery, but it won't be until end of February.
Yeah, because she was going on vacation and she didn't want to do it before her vacation because she wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Post-surgery.
So there was that. In the meantime, I had my diagnosis, which is basically by colonoscopy. And they said, well, you have the worst Crohn's and ulcerative colitis we've ever seen. We'll put you on steroids and see where that goes. If things don't get better, we'll have to think about what they call bowel resection, you know, cut out the bad parts.
Wait, you must have been having really severe symptoms at this point.
Oh, I put it this way. It didn't work. Nothing below my mouth worked. There's no bowel movements. It was just complete seizure in terms of that. So
he was in constant pain.
So there's a lot of, you try to have anything you can through fluids, and I can't quite remember how that worked, but it had to be fluid, and I'm sure I was losing weight. But so what happened is them putting me on steroids, and it was already a stress-induced situation, so I was already on steroids endogenously, if you will, and they created exacerbated, we'll say, to be charitable, anemia. So I went into severe anemia to the point that I needed, by another doctor, at least 4 blood transfusions to get through the day.
But not only that, once he was diagnosed by this first doctor, they put him on a diet of white bread, white rice.
So
and he being a naturopathic doctor, we hadn't had any wheat or gluten in about 20 years. no
So
white rice or
their
anything.
perspective, and it's, it's like when you're so sick, you go, I surrender, just take care of me and we'll have our differences afterwards. And that apparently that didn't work. But the reason they had that kind of diet of white bread, I don't know if the sugar was there or not, but it was had to be white, was they call low roughage, low fiber diet. And it's real simplistic thinking. And I go, all right, obviously me knowing these other answers didn't work, so I'll listen to your answers. And that clearly made it far, far worse.
Well, what were you eating then? What was
We're gluten and dairy free, and so we have a huge vegetable garden. So we're pretty much vegetarian now. I don't think we would have called ourselves vegetarian. We had a grill, so we'd go out and grill things, but we grilled vegetables and so on. So it was primarily, I'd say 90% vegetarian.
Yeah. So it was heavily plant-based. It was plants.
Yes.
Plants.
Yep.
A lot of beans, a lot of veggies, very little meat.
Right. A lot of salads.
Because, when he went to medical school, they were pretty much taught more plant-based.
Clearly, I would say to this day, it's still a divergent issue with me and a lot of my colleagues and certainly classmates. They're still into plant-based medicine, and I get tired of people who can't think for themselves, I guess, and I go, all right, good for you. I got it.
So when you were sort of uplifted a little bit by the sort of crisis medicine management at first, that gave you a little bit of energy back and then now you have this time, you said earlier, what did you then, how did you get to keto?
So when you have about 90 days, when you have a blood transfusion, you have 90 days. So red blood cells live for 120. So you have 90 days. And if you're not producing your own blood, you're going to need more blood transfusions, or in my case was the threat of bowel resection. So when I looked then, and I did the obvious, is that we actually got into bone broth for me. I said, I need something for my gut just to what's the calmest thing that I can think about that is not gluten or dairy. So it was all about bone broth, but I was so sick then that we had to do bone broth in the garage. I just couldn't
I didn't like the smell.
Didn't know that smell. I've done it since, and I don't know what I was talking about, but then it was like, please, God, get it outside. We then got, and I didn't tell you about this.
You even looked into where you could get chicken feet, because they heard chicken feet was good for broth because of the collagen.
That's right, we did. Good.
We had to special order chicken feet so we could make broth.
Then you had to learn how to clip off the nails, and so we had great broth, and so it was remarkable. And so if you're going to focus on something, do the best you possibly can. So got into it. My orientation is a lot of Chinese medicine as well, so it was pretty easy to pivot over to that direction.
Since you were interested in Chinese medicine, were you taking Chinese herbs then at that point?
I had it's hard to remember all. I mean, I had a whole pharmacy of at least 500 different herbs, and then various combinations and formulas. And so I'm an ND and not only a licensed acupuncturist, but plant herbal certified and what they call a diplomat of Oriental medicine.
Were you taking Chinese herb soups then? Were you?
The soups are a little bit, so they call it juk, by the way. Yes, I was in that direction. Perhaps that's what opened the door to that. It's like, I need liquid. What are soothing liquids? It was Chinese medicine for the most part in there. So where we started though, at that point, it's all right. There wasn't anything cute, it wasn't like you got this locked down and we're hoping the broths are doing well. Is that we got into a thing called FMT, which is a little bit of a diagnosis, a little bit of a detour. That's called, what's the nice word? Fecal microbiota transplant. So you take it from somebody else. And so I go, this sounds pretty radical. So I called around and I got to know who the best in the world are. And a couple of things happened. You got PayPal, you got email pals with doctors in Belgium and Australia and France who really could exchange on this level and were, give me some research, what are you doing? And there was a international conference in Miami. It happened to be every 4 years, they would have this international conference for gastroenterologists. So I said, I'm going to that because these three guys are going to be there. So I went to that one, got to meet them, started to ask some questions about really what to do and other studies and so on. And there's a huge prejudice in the United States about this.
Well,
huge prejudice
pretty
about
much illegal.
it is. Oh yeah, absolutely. So now my knowledge is coming from outside the United States. And so then they had another one at the University of Chicago a couple months later, specifically focused on FMT. And now it's called pretty much something similar, a smaller acronym. And so I got to meet these guys again. And actually, there were a few people from the FDA kind of infiltrating, trying to find out what's going on. But you got to see presentations by American doctors pretty much against it. Oh, well, you really can't do this. And this is how we do it. Then you get Tom Brody, who's the best in the world. He's in Melbourne, actually Sydney, Australia, and he's years ahead. Everybody would bow when he came in because he had more experience than anything else from all the different studies. So anyway, I got to know him very well. And we continued. And so I used Judi as my donor, did it for 3 months. And I think that was the first step of giving me some life about, all right, now you're not going to self-destruct. But that didn't answer the question, what do I eat? Where do I go to continue that? And so
you felt, so you felt an improvement with using that transplant therapy.
Yes, correct.
Sort of got you sort of started with that, and then you had to sort of adjust about what you're going to eat.
Yeah, I would say
well, up to that point, he was on pretty heavy medications, Humira, which the doctor said he would be on for life. But then if you read the side effects of that, they pretty much cause death anyway. So he wanted.
Is that a steroid?
No, it's not. It's a TNF inhibitor, so tumor necrosis factor alpha inhibitor. And so what it does, it turns off part of your immune system. And this is how allopathic medicine thinks, like, well, just, we'll turn off the alarm.
Let's cut off your head.
Yeah, right. So I go, wow, this is like, it's amazing. And there's really, and you have to actually do all these tests just to sort of qualify for taking it. They make it seem like, and you can't miss, you have to give yourself shots, alternating, that's how it goes. And then there's 2 other meds, I can't even remember what they are now, that are on. So I got off of that against advice, and now knowing that I had a foundation that I wasn't going to disappear tomorrow. And, and now, and I quelled my immune system, maybe with the help, Judi thinks the medications helped. I don't know, but
you're alive.
Yeah, no, I think it was mostly FMT. And so with that then we started keto, which really was a step forward from bone broth. And from there got to be, the conferences were just starting down at University of South Florida in Tampa, and then got to meet, that was only 60 people. I got to get in under the wire, and now I got to meet all these people I read about and started to collaborate with them.
Well, and also January of 2014, we had moved because I could no longer work. He wasn't working. And we said, well, let's move to someplace we want to live and enjoy life. So we moved to Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And he was still saying, I'm a naturopathic doctor. Why can't I heal myself? So he started watching all these YouTube videos on keto and paleo and keto.
Right.
And that's how we switched. And I did it mainly for him, but also post-surgery and the steroids I had and eating the white bread and the white rice, I had gained about 40 pounds.
Wow.
So I'm not a very big person.
Yeah, you're little.
Yeah, I am. So I was hoping that it would help me to lose weight. So I had the goal of wanting to lose weight, and he had the goal of healing his gut. The difficult transition for us was we had to eat more meat, and we weren't used to eating meat. So that for me,
would you have called this keto or paleo? What do you think?
Well, the first month we were paleo, then we switched to keto.
Okay.
The definitions are still kind of loosey-goosey at that point.
Well, I mean, one is really featuring ketones and fat adaptation, and paleo is not really about that.
Right. I agree. I went back, and so for I remember some of the YouTubes, but basically I doubt anybody I see. I mean, it's a good idea. I go back and do the history of, and so actually at this point I started a podcast, I think. No, it wasn't. No, it was later. Anyway, I went back to find out what was the history of keto. What do we know about it? And it really came out of fasting and the classic ketogenic diet by, Russell Wilder in 1921 and formulated in 25 by Pennington and so on and so forth. I go, all right, now I know baseline, and you can come forward into the history there. And why did keto get started? Well, because fasting worked for type 1 diabetes. But the thing about fasting is you got to eat sometime. And if you fast forever, you die. And so that was 3 weeks fast was for type 1 diabetics. And so it was good to know these things because you needed to come forward in time, because when people try to present their position now, they leave out a lot of things, and there's a lot of truths that are left behind. And so I like to bring it up to sort of be more comprehensive and not think that, oh, my life has to be about exogenous ketones now, so I can't remember exactly where we got into carnivore, but you remember? She's good with dates. I am.
We started 3 years ago in January because you tell me these are the rules, I'm going to stick by the rules. So we were a very strict keto. Ingredients mattered, 20 carbs or less, and protein.
Wait, can I ask you, were you eating 10 cups of cruciferous vegetables?
No, I was counting my 20. I was counting my 20 carbs.
It was basically salads, though. What was our carbs?
We had salads. We did have some broccoli occasionally or cauliflower, but
that wasn't a feature. Okay, great.
No, right.
But the protein was very limited, and at that time, keto was high fat. So I'm like, well, how do I eat more fat? How do you get more fat? I wasn't into fat bombs. I don't like sweet things.
That seemed very contrived.
And I was hungry a lot of the times because my protein was limited.
Yeah.
So I've been hearing about carnivore and people saying, well, you don't have to track anything. I was so tired of tracking. After 5 years, it's like, I can't track anymore. So I said, Karl, on January 2nd, for 30 days, I'm going to try carnivore, because I'd have dinner, I'd be hungry because I didn't have a lot of protein, and I felt really bloated and uncomfortable. And I'm like, I'm not eating anything. How can I be this? So we tried carnivore for 30 days, and here we are 3 years later, because no more bloating.
So even,
I loved veggies. I loved them, but they don't like me.
Yeah.
I would say it's even evolved from there too, but yeah, you're correct. I remember, the whole ribeye idea, and it's like, okay, I don't think I really knew what ribeyes were. I mean, I wasn't even that educated about cuts of meat, besides the obvious. And so we started there. I go, this is a lot of fat. I still have this fat issue. Like, this has got to be a little bit too contrived. We're not epileptic, don't have a family history of it. And so then we sort of migrated into protein sparing modified fast, however you want to call that. And so we do that now 3 or 4 days a week. And I would say it's between meat and lean meat, whatever. It could be fish, could be poultry, could be whatever. But we've really cut back on the fat. And that's, so we went from immune secure to she lost some weight, certainly. I don't know if I had much weight to lose. Actually, I was building back. But we went to protein sparing modified fast. I'm back to high school weight, and I'm
actually below my high school weight.
I mean, I did triathlons and football and all this other stuff. It's like I could do it tomorrow.
So I'm not fat phobic. If I want to eat it, I'll eat it. If I don't want to eat it, I don't feel I have to. So that's where we are transitioned pretty much, and I eat what I want to eat, pretty much.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, it's like the whole idea of that we had to be limited in terms of how much protein. I always thought it was real ignorant for people to talk in terms of macros. It's like protein. It's like, just what kind of protein eating? It's like, so anyway, I would say I'm way higher than anything I thought was safe before, and I'm fine. It's like you go to appetite. If you're not eating, and it truly is. It's satiating. Done.
Yeah, and then there's differences of age. I think as we get older,
for sure,
we need more protein. When you were keto, can I ask you what would be a typical day of eating for you? It probably varied for those years that you were doing it, but if you could sort of think of what would be a typical the meals that you would have? You would have salads, and you were having chicken or something.
Yes, lunches, I never ate a lot for lunch, but maybe a cucumber with tuna salad on it, or salami because it's high in fat, and salami roll-ups or something like that for lunches. Then dinner would just be, I don't think we ate a lot of steak, but it was probably more chicken.
Yeah, we
Chicken
also learned,
and a veggie.
we started making our own mayo. We used caprylic acid, triglyceride, MCT oil, put it in with the mayo, and that was kind of our fallback. To have mayo on whatever. That was the fat part. Have the mayo on whatever. On the meat, yeah, add your mayo, add your MCT oil, and
Right, because you had to have high fat. I would just scoop out mayo because, oh, I haven't had enough fat today. And I'd eat
Yeah.
mayo.
Were you still eating nuts?
No.
when did that stop? That was initially, that was a big deal. I remember I'll do all
initially-
these nut butter things, and it's realized it's like that's
Initially-
garbage.
Initially we did, but then one time Carl was eating macadamia nuts and he realized he was just eating them. And you can't just eat as much as you want.
And I think that was
and
another.
I know for me, I know that nuts will make me gain weight.
That was, but yeah,
They so don't love you back. Nuts.
No, they don't.
So
No,
don't
they
love you
don't.
back. Absolutely. So don't love you back. Yeah, I know. So I challenged a lot of what I thought in school. I always thought about, now I'm pre-keto, going back to medical school, is like, well, hey, nut butter was like your protein source. And now I go, that's such garbage. Yeah, you can rationalize anything, and I think that, boy, nuts out, fat drop down considerably unless you really want fat at some point. And it's like, it is on cruise for the rest.
Polyunsaturated fatty acids. It's all polyunsaturated.
Yeah, right. No,
you want.
it's all, no, I'm big saturated fat guy now. I mean, it's like, other than your fish oils, it's like, if it's not saturated fat and you're polyunsaturated would be your fish oils, your essential, your fish oil that you take either as a supplement or you take it in terms of fish.
Essential.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, so when you first started, Judi, when you first I'm going to do carnivore, and the next day you had like a steak for your first meal, what did that feel like? Because I know how it felt like to me, and I'm just curious what it felt like to you.
It was a while back.
I felt satiated for the first time in 5 years. Yeah. Because I ate, they read, eat until you're full, like Thanksgiving full. And I was like, well, I couldn't do that. I just ate until I felt I was done.
Yeah.
And I wasn't hungry, and I felt good, and I wasn't bloated, and I liked it.
And
yeah.
How soon did you join her, Carl?
Well, we did this at the same
together.
time. And I mean, Judy's like these very clear memories and times and so on and so forth. I go, I'm not that clear. And what I noticed was, so I became a skeptic, so now I got, keto wasn't exactly all they had it revved up to be. It almost seems like it was a marketing scam to get you to exogenous ketones, but there's some truths along the way that were worth, thinking about. So we got into paleo or not paleo, sorry, carnivore, and I hated the labels. It's like, I was also skeptical, what's behind this curtain that was partially truthful and partially misleading. And that was that's kind of where I am on a lot of things. And so it was pretty easy to do. It was satisfying, and sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so it wasn't until I think we might've had a salad a year later or something like this, I realized, wow, that's really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm really surprised. I go, is it the salad or is it the kind of the carbs? And it's the carbs, I would go, speaking in that terms.
I think it's the salad.
Yeah, I think it could be either. I mean, it's happened too frequently. It's like, what other carbs would I put in there that wouldn't have that effect? But
I also noticed that one time we had a salad, I was starving the next morning because carbs make you hungry. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm starving. And normally I'm not hungry.
And when you had that salad, you had dressing on
right.
it.
We used oil and vinegar. We're oil and vinegar people for the most part at home, but yeah. So I mean, there was more fat there. I don't think.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was something. That was an interesting, the ability to identify that as, that actually wasn't that great, because your whole microbiome transition. Now you're about meat and some fat, and also, which is kind of going without saying, no processed food. We didn't do processed food. The salami was the closest one to processed food. But that's a big deal. People don't talk about that much, but you got to get that garbage out. It's just not a choice.
So what do you eat now? What would be your typical
Well,
day?
For me, I have a can of sardines for lunch. And I make this protein bread with egg whites, so I have some of that with it. And then dinner is 5 days a week. It's steak. One night we'll have chicken, one night we'll have pork, but
Yeah, and
that's
it's
it.
right. So 3 of the days anyway are I won't say fat free, but they're just lean meat. So the pork is lean meat. They got the fat. The chicken's lean meat. And so mine, first of all, I have not had I'm only going to have one meal a day, and I'm kind of OMAD for the most part. But my snack will be, if I go down around lunchtime, leftovers from last night. So if it's more leftover chicken, then I just slice it up, and that's my snack. And so it's the meat when we sit down at 5:30. That's what we'll have. And then Judi has made this protein bread, which is like our, what do you call them? Anyways, crumpets. Yeah, she calls them the crumpets. And that's what we have after dinner, is kind of like we have our tea and the crumpets after dinner while we maybe watch a show on Netflix or something. But that's it, and if I'm hankering for fat, we still make the mayo. I will do Judi's thing of taking out the crumpets, the protein bread, put on some of that, but that's not every day, for sure, not every day.
So do you feel like you're allergic to dairy?
Not allergic.
Yes. I'm something to dairy.
I just think, no, I think it's the case. So you could say that covers a lot. I think the case, so from now practicing, so my guess is we've seen about, I don't know, 16,000 people going back and saying, regardless of supplements and all the other things they had to do for whatever their situation was, from cancer to MS to a cold and flu, I say, drop the dairy, drop the gluten. Obviously that's going to be grain, so that's not an issue with keto, but just take dairy out for 2 months, bring it back in, and draw your own conclusion. It's just at least half, if not 80% of all the people I've said, dairy is a processed food now. Unless you have your own cow in your own yard and having your own raw milk, and that's a whole different issue, it's a processed food. It's homogenized, it's pasteurized, and it's refined. And so what I find, I think, has a lot to do with weight gain. I can tell. I do a lot of lab work. We have a program.
2 years ago, I was having a crisis birthday. It wasn't a crisis. I was going to turn 65. And I'm like, that's something to celebrate. So the whole month of December, I'm like, I'm going to let myself have dairy. So I had heavy whipping cream in my coffee. I had cheese. I think I made a cheesecake. So I had dairy every day. And when my blood work came back, 1, I gained weight. 2, whenever I do have dairy, I can tell my knees ache terribly. But some of my blood work, he saw I guess my homocysteine was it, and Carl's like, that's cancer range. What are you doing?
Yeah.
So and my CRP was high. So I dropped dairy, and 2 months later I redid my blood work, and everything was normal.
Huh.
Oh yeah, it was the highest.
So even if you were just using butter.
Butter is kind of on the edge there. I tell people for that 2 months, you got to make things simple. I said, everything's out. You're not doing cow these 2 months. Bring it back and have it what you were doing before, and draw your own conclusions. And that's.
But we do some coaching, and one thing that Carl says and do is, like, for this entire time, you cannot have any dairy, butter, nothing.
Yeah.
And people really notice a difference. And most people remain dairy free after, or we say introduce it back and see how you feel. So most people remain dairy free, and some people actually even turn carnivore, because we don't hide the fact that we're carnivore. Yes, we have keto groups, and I do some keto recipes, but they know we're carnivore.
Yeah.
And do you drink coffee?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
that's why we're not 100% carnivore.
Well,
yeah. Yeah, that's right. I don't actually go for labels.
There's no special, metal.
I don't go for labels. That's why this podcast has been going on for about 3 years now. I go, this is what I do. And this is non-monetized and so on. I said, this is my journey and this is where I am. I said, I do like the coffee, and you can do it or not do it. Don't worry about a definition. Do what's best for you.
And how's your sleep?
Good.
So everything is good.
Yeah. No, we're good.
Did you have, since you had Crohn's disease, did you have, what was that transition like for you? I know that the transition actually goes to keto for some years and then carnivore. So maybe you can, like, what was the transition? Well, to keto, you were already plant-based. And then with keto, you still ate plants. You were dropping maybe some vegetables or something, and maybe you were dropping fruit.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And then with carnivore, you just dropped plants, more plants.
Yep. Yeah. And so, yeah, I was skeptical. So I drag, everything when something seems to be a fad, which keto, I don't see keto as a fad, by the way. I mean, it goes back, if you're talking about classic ketogenic diet, it goes back to more data on keto than anything else in the world, period. And then if you think it's more ancestral, well, then you opened up that. So everything else is the exception in terms of how much time. So what was it like for me? It's like, when did my gut get better? For me, it was pretty easy to go from nothing's working to something's working. Oh, I'm severely anemic. I got to get out of this one. And so by the time I came around to keto to carnivore, I was feeling good gastrointestinally, but it wasn't like I was in my prime or feeling like, right now I feel like I have just stripped away. I mean, we work out, and we talked about the gym earlier. It's like we do HIT 2 days a week, and we go back for something else. We do HIIT here at home. And so that's part of it. That's always been part of me. I was the athlete thing. It was a little bit different with Judi, but we do it together. And it's like, so I'm going to be 65 in July. Thank you, Judi. And it's like, I could have been 22. Say if you said I was 22, other than wrinkles, I'm good. This is solid. So no skepticism.
Help you feel stronger. The meat helped you feel stronger.
But
Absolutely.
even on keto with your gut stuff, sometimes vegetables would bother you.
Yeah, that was a real wow, that is amazing. And so it clearly made me think differently. And so it was hard to talk to colleagues because they're over here until you're driven by crises and you have to look through things at a different filter. You're just the same person advising people, well, we'll try this, we'll try that. It's like, no, radical changes come from a real need to make a change,
But
crisis.
I also want to say that a couple of years ago, he had another colonoscopy, and the doctor said, you never would have known you had colitis.
Yeah, right. They can't even find the scar, absolutely. They can't even find the scar. So I'm so anti-vegetarian for the most part. We've had some people like that through our groups, and you can right away, you guys, I know what labs you're going to be. And so I know how to convince you to say, we got to make some changes if you want to live. You don't have to live, but I'm telling you, and so.
Do you explain that to your clients, to your patients, about phytates and lectins and, goitrogens?
I try not to go, I try to keep it, so what I find is those conversations, and those are good conversations to have. Those conversations are not as convincing as, here are your labs, you are below, and you pull out a few and saying, this is because you're eating this way. So if I can draw those attentions, because phytate does bind minerals and so on and so forth, that's a bigger conversation to have. But if you say,
I guess I meant the concept of plants are not necessarily virtuous and your best friend,
right,
as your main diet.
That's a great way to say it. I tend to walk around that and show them, okay, you're feeling great, and this is how you're eating. You can draw your own conclusions. And now, because if you open up too many labels at one point, they're kind of like, so what clan am I following? But that's correct. It's a great way of saying it. After the fact, looking back, people, I find, this is now sort of patient therapeutic stuff, they can accept that. But if you open up too many at one point, they just may not go forward. So that's, but yeah, I know you're 100% correct. And I remember I way back had cancer patients coming in that I was working with that I was still pro, hey, we need to do the green drinks, not juicing to have them hyper concentrated, but counseling them on that. And I realized, wow, that was wrong. That was actually wrong. I would say that's wrong now. Other people would still fight me on it. But I'd say, no.
That was the head exploding moment for so many people. Like, oh, you mean?
I think if you look at,
vegetables aren't like the more the better.
No, I agree. It is kind of head exploding moment. If you look at plants as being medicinal, like drugs. And that's, I mean, there's a place for that. Botanical medicine is wonderful. Chinese herbal medicine is basically botanical medicine. All that's wonderful. But if you don't eat your medicines, you don't eat your drugs, you know, you use them for these particular times to move you on.
They have
And so
effects.
that's right. So there's a place for that. That's how I've sidestepped it, you know, for my colleagues. But botanical medicine, absolutely. Eating my medicines, no. You know, I don't find that. And then you get the odd arguments of, well, not everybody in the world eats that way. I said, no, not everybody in the world does. And yes, you go to the Polynesians and so on and so forth. They had tapioca, and they would have. It says, well, you can explain it slightly differently, but it's still fascinating to have that kind of conversation. It's a little more intelligent.
And they didn't only have tapioca.
Right.
They have fish and pork.
I agree. No, it's right. That's like when you look at what they had that fell on their heads, you know, MCT oil falling on their head. There's coconut. If you look at the fish they had on a regular basis, that gave them such a foundation for health that, yeah, they could have some of the other. And
probably fish, you know, their fat is almost as saturated as butter. It's really.
Oh, it is. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, it leads you back to saturated fats all the time. And the largest, how do I say this? The highest concentration of fat in our body is a thing called palmitic acid. It's basically a very long saturated fat, right? 16 carbons. Cut that in half is 8. That's caprylic acid. Cut that in half, it's butyrate. And so what a convenient multiple. In essence, you got 4 ketones lined up in palmitic acid. It's our permanent reserve for us calling on when we need to be in ketosis, you know, and helping us. So it's like,
when we make fat in our body from,
right.
You know, if we eat too many carbs or something that day, when we make fat, we make saturated fat.
Right. That's right.
Because that's the fat we're going to need to eat. And
yeah.
we don't make polyunsaturited fat. You know, we make.
No, I agree. And
I mean,
it speaks to a lab that in my lab understanding, I've certainly moved away. Cholesterol is useless for the most part. But you look at triglycerides and HDL as a ratio, and that in your home free, you can tell a lot about that. If you had to that and fasting insulin and fasting glucose. I like doing glucagon. That's an expensive test, but that's opened the door for understanding. But you don't have to have that. Just those 4 tests and you're pretty much good.
Well, so can I just ask you, what's your typical day? We heard what Judi usually eats. Do you eat the same, or you probably have a little bit different, or different times a day? Or
I just do the leftovers from the night before. That's my hack. You know, so
what a good man.
So yeah, so the new dinner is a new setting of the new leftovers as well. You know, I mean, unless I scarf everything that Judi doesn't eat, which often does happen, and then I complain that, wait a minute, what happened when we had these? You know, where's all the leftovers go? But that's it. I pull it out of the refrigerator, I slice it up, and that's my snack for the next day.
Sounds like it's working really great for you guys.
I'm good with that. You know, it's like. So tonight tonight we're gonna go out to dinner. Oh yeah, where are we going? Outback. Really? Yeah. What are you gonna have? Same thing we always have.
Yeah. What do you have? What do you have at Outback? Yeah.
Have a sirloin steak. We've tried all these other things. It's I think I have it's only 11 ounce. It's too bad. Could be bigger. But she doesn't have half of hers, so then I have half of hers plus mine, and I'm good.
Well, when we were on Cape Cod, it was really interesting, and we had just started to be carnivores. So we'd order a dinner, say no sides. But then we'd order, they have sides of meat, so we'd order some of that. And finally, one of the waiters, because they knew us, we went there all the time, they said, stop ordering the dinners, just order the sides of meat.
Yeah, right.
And so that's what we would do.
Yeah.
But we moved here to North Carolina, and there are no sides of meat. You know, usually you can have a salad, and then for $6, you can have steak. But they don't do that, because I would like to just I want my sirloin steak and a side of steak, but
you're like at McDonald's where you could just get meat patties.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, so Outback is a possibility.
By default, you know, it's like we would go to other restaurants, but it's all this other crap. You know, it's like I'm not going to pay $80 for the 20% that I eat. You know?
Yeah, very good.
So
sounds good. Do you have what's your advice for someone who's thinking about doing carnivore?
I would say
just do it.
I would say just
try it. Try it for 30 days. If you don't like, if you try it, and if you don't like it, you don't have to stick with it. But you'll never know if you don't try.
Well, that's true. What I've learned is we're not all starting in the same place. And so, and that is a big difference. So I spent a couple of days up at Duke with Dr. Westman, and he was really generous. And so one day was about new patients, the other day was about returning patients. So I got to talk to him and pal around with him and between patients and so on. And I asked him what his success rate was. He said it's about 50%. And I go, really? Why is that? What about those that don't get the results? Because they have to wait 6 months to have this appointment. So it's not like they're randomly chosen off the street. And he has a little class that people go to. And this is not negative in any way. He said, lack of compliance. And I go, no, wait a minute. Nobody waits that in line, and say, I didn't understand. You get a booklet. I mean, it's like, and they come back. And so that started me saying, why is this? And Virta Health is the same thing. It's about 50%, 49, 51, 50%. And it's like, what about the 50% are not getting benefits from keto? And so my way was to jump into, and this labs have become bigger and bigger and bigger. And it sort of illustrates the obvious point, which is we're all starting at a different place, not genomically, you could say, but if you're coming from a high carb, high fat, standard American diet, and you go to keto, you're going to have problems in that transition. It's going to be argumentatively not as easy for somebody who's already keto to slide over to carnivore or to protein sparing modified fast, whatever. And so that is a big difference. And you need to coddle people, whether it's it's so much garbage we eat in this world, the processed foods, they have been in a famine of nutritionally poor food. And that individual can't go into a nutritionally dense diet of just carnivore or PSC.
Or just becoming fat adapted.
That's part of it. And I would say that really takes about 6 months. Some people can go, oh, I got ketones, but that's not the story. It's the turnover of receptors and so on and so forth. It's the microbiome that needs to change. You need to upregulate certain bacteria, downregulate virus and so on and so forth. But that takes time. And so I think the idea of instantaneous change, which is not what you're saying, I know that, is really being sold a bill of goods, and it's a slow change, and to respect that and to identify what that change is for that person and to coddle it in that direction. So I do believe, 100% of the people should be doing what I'm doing, but maybe 2% can start tomorrow or maybe more, depending what crowd I'm talking to. But that's it. So you coddle them through that migration, through that transition. Fat adaptation is part of it. Microbiome is another part of it. And
so it sounds like you're saying sort of like, take it slow.
Yeah, absolutely. Because people are going to get disappointed and they expect an instantaneous change. The whole hack thing, we can biohack. I really hate that term. Because it comes across, you don't have to think about it, you don't have to do anything, which is kind of like where we are right now. But it took a while to think about and get to simplicity and saying, this is it. But so anyway, so I think that people do have to go step by step and to have some awareness. When I we have a Facebook group and so on, people say things, oh, I tried keto, it doesn't work. What exactly did you try? Never get an answer.
Yeah.
It's like,
or jump in, but expect some stops along the way.
I would say clearly that's a mature way of offering that kind of information. And that immediately makes me think people 40 years of age and older, if not, the idea that, oh yeah, you need to put in some work, need to make some change. I think there's just this, I don't want to say generational, obviously there's smart people clearly that are under that, but the idea of biohacking your way into health is impossible. It's not going to be a supplement. It's not going to be a pill.
That both keto carnivore groups that I'm in, and I just like to keep up to date, but so many people complain, but I'm not losing weight, but I'm not losing weight, but I'm not losing weight. And it's like, it's not a one size fits all. You got to find out what works for you. Some people, I used to swear that, and when I first started keto, I had to eat high fat to lose weight. But now it's like, I have to, if I want to lose weight and I'm not trying to lose any weight anymore, then I'd have to drop fat. So it's like, you have to find out what works.
And that high, it took us a while to get off that high fat portion initially. And where I justify that now is, let's say in our groups and so on, is that sort of boxes the metabolism in to make that transition of high fat. you know, so now they know, because, you know, protein, carbohydrates, and fats are all sources for foods, and they take different paths to get there. But if you box it into high fat, I think you will probably accelerate that change, you know. But they
You froze. Darn. Let's give it a minute and see if it unfreezes. Let's see. There, you're back. You're back. You froze for a minute. Are you muted?
that was bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're back. Good.
Yeah, we're back. So anyway, the transition is, if you can, either, you know, people who are wise to making a change takes
Yeah.
work. They're home.
Yeah, pay attention to the signs along the way, because your needs will change as it goes along, and you keep getting to tweak it.
Right.
And make
Absolutely,
it your own.
absolutely. You know,
Well-
and it pulls you, and be curious about yourself. You know, make yourself the edge of all that you know. And that's the way I look at it. You know, yeah, because I have medicine behind me, but I think everybody, it's like, how do I make myself better without getting into the pills and supplements and so on and so forth? I am
Right.
pro supplements, but I mean, that can cloud it all initially.
But also, as you say, it changes along the way, because when I first did carnivore and I wanted steak, and then there came a period of time that I didn't want beef at all. I just couldn't eat beef, so you transition to something else, and then I find a week or two later, it's like, all I want is beef, and right now it's like, all I want is beef, and if I have chicken, I'll eat it, but it's not as satisfying as a nice big steak.
Along that idea, her culinary expertise and mine sort of following understanding of meat cuts and cooking. I mean, we got a smoker, we got a grill, and of course we have the oven. She has her probes for the right temperature. Our cuts of meat have evolved. I mean, I'm not a big fan of ribeye anymore. I don't dislike them, but a nice thick sirloin, a nice thick New York steak, certainly a porterhouse. But the creme de la creme is picanha, which is really
Sirloin cat.
Oh, is it picanha? That's interesting. I can't
Yeah,
always.
absolutely. I mean, it's the diet. She even she's trained the meat department at one of the stores. She calls up once a week and asks for these 2 mammoth sirloin caps, picanha, and then we smoke them. Have we grilled them?
Yeah, we grill them now because the smoker died.
Yeah, because smoker died. And it's like, oh my gosh. And so her skill in doing this, so it's considering I didn't even really, couldn't recognize a ribeye from sirloin 5 or 6 years ago. And now it's like, we are haute cuisine, we are snobs. Oh no, in a liver pate.
Yay.
Considering 8 years ago, we didn't even eat meat.
That's true. But also we've gone into liver pate. So I mean, organ meats, which is me, that means egg yolks and liver. And it is necessary. You can't just be all muscle tissue.
So do you make pate, Judi?
Yeah, yep. I haven't, there's none in the fridge right now, but I always go, Judi, get me some liver. I need some.
And saying I won't eat liver, so I eat egg yolks.
Yeah, that is like another organ meat for sure.
Yeah, that's what we
Well,
call
sounds
it.
good. So you're eating, sounds like you're eating all the meats, all the animal foods. Are you eating shellfish, oysters?
Haven't for a while, but we did a lot in the Cape. They suddenly you get higher in carbs. I do love shellfish, have nothing to do with it. And I do believe
Well, when we lived on the Cape, we actually used to go clamming to get our own clams, and we did oyster for a while. We're from New Hampshire, actually, so my family's a big lobster family.
by 3 generations.
Like 3 generations. So right now, I would kill for a lobster.
So
Maybe they should send some out to you.
I know. I'm thinking of calling my nephew and saying, ship me some lobster.
That's right. Out of
Nice.
Maine, right? That's where her folks are. Well, her folks are passed, but her family lives in
sister.
Maine, Kittery, and so on.
Nice. Sounds like you guys are making it work. Really wonderful.
Yeah, no, it's pretty simple now. It's like,
Well, and the reason we hadn't eaten a lot of fish is there wasn't any place around here to buy good fish. I bought it a few times in the grocery store and I ended up throwing it away. But we just bought a house in December in the same area, and just like a mile away is a really good fish market. So I plan on
the
going
problem.
there.
The problem with fish, though, I mean, in the perfect world, if we're not polluted, fish are great. Go, but fish are fairly polluted. So you do have to look at the swordfish and the tuna and so on and so forth. I mean, now you could look at your tuna can, they went from, we don't have mercury in this tuna to low mercury tuna. It's like saying just a little toxicity. It's like, seriously, but they have to admit it because it's true. And so I use those sparingly. I mean, I love tuna and swordfish and all the others as much as anybody else. If you could live a life on Alaskan salmon, that clearly would be the best way to go. So other than that, smaller, that's why sardines and mackerels, they're so small, they don't bioaccumulate, all that stuff. So it is a factor. I know that from practice. I've seen a lot of mercury toxicity by people who just rely on tuna fish.
Do you use tallow then as your cooking fat?
We have plenty of tallow.
No, bacon grease.
Whichever comes easy, but
Because I don't have tallow, but I get a lot of bacon grease.
she now has a tallow face cream, which is pretty cool. So we'll see. So yeah, tallow. When you have bone marrow, once you get into the bone marrow and you learn about tallow.
Well,
Right.
if you're just cooking a lot of steak, you've got tallow.
Yep.
I mean, all tallow is beef fat. So
Yep.
but yeah, suet, suet is extra good tallow.
Yeah. Right.
Especially beef fat, high in stearic acid, but really it seems like there's just tallow all over my kitchen.
Yeah. I think once you get into saturated fats, your body's going to take care of it. I used to think that, why is everything stearic acid? There was a guy, who's the guy that does the croissant diet? He adds stearic acid to things. Like, why?
Yeah.
It seems a little contrived, and he said it makes it work, but he speaks highly of saturated fats, and that was the link that's like, you're right about that part. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good on that. That's Brad's work.
that's
It was
right.
great to meet with you guys. I'm really glad that it's working so well for you and that you have this reach to affect so many people. When I
It's
think of
awesome.
those two situations that you were both going through during that year, it's like it brought everything right up to the surface, right up to the edge, and you're able to.
Right.
I kind of wonder if we didn't have that crisis of health, where would we be now? Probably we wouldn't have gone through that, but I don't think we'd be as healthy as we are now. Kind of what you
probably
said.
just have worse teeth.
Yeah.
My teeth, all that plant-based or nearly plant-based stuff.
Yeah.
You end up with weak teeth and probably bones.
I totally buy that now. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great for the dentist. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks again, and
Yeah.
I loved your idea of reminding people that things take time. Changes take time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Good
So,
talking.
Carney on.
Namaste.